this opportunity to welcome our viewers across the United States. They have joined us along with our global audience as we take you through this breaking news. A 7.9 earthquake in Japan, a powerful quake. And we know at this point that a tsunami warning has been issued covering Japan, Papua New Guinea, right across that region. Very widespread warning covering that whole
Meraki
area.
Airport was shaken violently. Part of the ceiling of the terminal building fell.
イズミ区で1件火災が発生しています。これは地震発生直後のです。
You're seeing live footage of a tsunami engulfing the port area of Kamai City in Iwate Prefecture. This is from our camera reporter in Miyagi. And it looks like the tsunami has engulfed several cities in Miyagi Prefecture. This is after a major earthquake hitting Japan Friday afternoon. In northeastern Japan's Iwate Prefecture, tsunami waves of over 4 meters were observed soon after the quake. In the Sendai area, Miyagi Prefecture, north of Japan.
March 2011 was not only Japan's biggest earthquake recorded ever, but it also started a new tragedy, a man-made tragedy that could change this world forever.
そのタービンを回して発電をするんですね。とその露出してしまうということはもう燃料棒、核燃料そのものが空中に現れることによって、空中に放散される可能性があると。水位が高いということは要するに水の中で核融合を起こさせることによって封じ込めているものが空中へ出てしまう可能性があるということですね。でなぜ水位が
This is the moment Japan's nuclear disaster began. A giant tsunami wave crashes into the Fukushima Daiichi power plant, seriously damaging the building's reactors. Crews have been fighting for a month to contain the world's most serious nuclear accident for 25 years. And now Hidehiko Nishiyama from Japan's Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency has revealed new regulations that he hopes will prevent this sort of disaster ever happening again.
This video shows the aftermath of the tsunami. It reached as high as 30 feet, slamming the Daiichi nuclear power plant. TEPCO, the Tokyo Electric Power Company, is forced to admit that the disaster could be the worst case scenario. Radiation has already been proven to leak into the atmosphere, but also into the ocean. So, what did happen at the Fukushima power plant after the tsunami? Let's use this illustration by the IRSN and figure out what did happen. Fukushima has 6 reactors. 5 and 6 were in op at the time of the incident. Fukushima's reactors are what you call a boiling water reactor, or a BWR. The metals inside create a heat exchange which they use to heat water, and that creates steam. The steam is piped through a turbine which generates electricity through a generator. After the earthquake, a lot of problems happened in the reactors. One of the main problems was the main cooling system started to fail. With no cooling system, the water eventually evaporates into the air and the metals are exposed. The metals melt together in what they call is corium. The corium melts through the reactor and onto the bottom of the reactor. Till this day, nobody knows exactly where the corium is, if it's gone through the reactor or through the metal plating. Another problem was the piping had cracks in it, which would release radioactive isotopes. This illustration shows the isotopes mixing with air and hydrogen. Eventually, the gases got so bad that they had to be vented out. The system was supposed to vent out into the atmosphere, but instead it vented into the building, causing a huge explosion. Tons of radioactive material was dumped into the atmosphere. This happened to all the reactors, and by March 15th, all reactors had exploded.
Thanks for joining us. Do they have control of the situation at the site?
No. It's still a ticking time bomb. Realize that after the big Sumatra tsunami, 90 days after, 3 months after that, there was a huge aftershock. If they have another aftershock, and they're not in cold shutdown yet till next year, the accident could start all over again. It's like hanging by your fingernails. Yeah, it's stable, but you're hanging by your fingernails.
Americans think this crisis is over, or that some even think that maybe it's solved or it's contained. It's not. What's happening right now?
In the last 2 weeks, everything we knew about that accident has been turned upside down. We were told 3 partial meltdowns, don't worry about it. Now we know it was 100% core melt in all 3 reactors. Radiation, minimal that was released. Now we know it was comparable to the radiation at Chernobyl. And as far as evacuation, yeah, 12 miles, that's it. You don't have to evacuate beyond 12 miles. Now they find hotspots, 4 hotspots outside the evacuation zone. 34,000 school children now have radiation badges when they go to school.
The Tokyo Electric Company, known as TEPCO, said more than 120 tons of radioactive water recently leaked from 3 of the 7 underground storage pools at the damaged Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. One problem is that there is not enough above-ground tanks to store the huge amounts of contaminated water. Work has been carried out to move nearly 130,000 tons of water from the pool where the leak appeared. It's been more than 2 years since a giant tsunami and earthquake hit the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, and the situation still remains highly unstable.
which was the design used at Fukushima, set up the fuel storage pool to be 100 feet in the air. And as a result of the accident, the residual rods from this unit are in a very, very precarious position. Now, we know that the earthquake did tremendous damage to Fukushima units 1, 2, 3, and 4. Thankfully, units 5 and 6 were higher up and were not as badly harmed. We have had explosions at units 1, 2, and 3, and the cores from units 1, 2, and 3 are in the ground somewhere. We don't know exactly where they are. The utility company, TEPCO, and the Japanese government have been pouring water onto the site, hoping to keep these cores cool. Unfortunately, we have had steam emissions at the site, which indicates there's still at least some heat coming from one or more of these cores. It significantly damaged the building at Unit 4. It may have damaged the fuel pool. It may have damaged some of the fuel. And for the last year and a half, since March 11th, 2011, this fuel core with some 1,300 or more fuel rods in it, it weighs 400 tons, and it contains as much radiation as would be necessary to deliver 13,000 times as much radioactive fallout as was released at Hiroshima. These rods, by the way, they're the most lethal substance human beings have ever created. If a rod had been in this room when we started this interview, we'd be all dead by now. It is incredibly toxic stuff. In addition to that, the fuel rods are clad in zirconium alloy. Zirconium alloy will spontaneously ignite if it's exposed to air. That's why it has to be kept underwater at all times. Zirconium is actually the element that was used in those old flash cubes that used to burn so bright and so quickly when you took a photograph in the old days.
Well, for many, many years now, I've been ticking off the ever-increasing sources of radiation to which humans are subjected. And they are so numerous and being added to all the time. It was very clear to me that there is an agenda here of subjecting humanity to more and more radiation. It's a long story and many, many elements to why, but the fact that they're doing it is becoming obvious. And so when the explosions at Fukushima happened in Japan, from my perspective, having looked at this over a number of years, it was just too much of a gift to this cabal, given the scale, the stunning scale of radiation that not only was released immediately, but has gone on being released ever since. And, you know, there's reports recently out of Europe of finding these high levels of radiation. And it's like, where's it coming from? Well, there's a very good chance of where it's coming from, because Fukushima has been pouring this stuff out incessantly, day after day after day. So I started looking into it, and one of the first things I noticed, and other people started looking at this as well, was that the explosion that was captured on video of one of the reactors exploding in Fukushima, and the explosion, the smoke stack of a small nuclear device were extraordinarily similar. So I then started looking at anything that could have explained this. And I came across the fact that in the years leading up to Fukushima, those reactors and that site in general had installed a new surveillance camera and sensor system. ludicrous. You know, you get these little tiny kind of mobile phones now. And yet, when mobile phones started, they were about that blooming big, and you're as old as you here with two ends, you know. Well, that was the kind of difference between the kind of surveillance technology you see normally now and these things. They weighed 1,000 pounds. And then, when you put one of those next to what they call a gun-type nuclear weapon, which is a small nuclear device, if you take the casing off the gun-type nuclear weapon, what is inside is, shall we say, not a million miles from what these cameras and sensors look like. And it was, with other information, it was my view, I concluded, that these were small nuclear devices and that Fukushima was blown up on purpose to release that radiation as part of this much wider radiation agenda to irradiate the atmosphere of the planet much more than it has been up to this point. And then I asked, of course, I asked the question, who put these devices in, these sensors in? And it turns out to be an Israeli company located at Dimona in Israel. And Dimona is the location of the massive Israeli nuclear weapons program.
Godley, Illinois, in the shadow of one of Exelon Corporation's nuclear power plants.
This is Exelon's property line.
2 years ago, people here learned they'd never been told about a series of leaks from the plant over a decade. Leaks that sent radioactive material into nearby water supplies.
We were angry, we were frightened. You turn on your tap in the morning and you don't know if that water is safe to drink.
Though most of the leaks were below levels officially considered hazardous, residents argued they should have been notified. They turned to their freshman U.S. Senator, Barack Obama, for help. Obama, while on the campaign trail, talked about the results.
So the only nuclear legislation that I've passed has been to make sure that the nuclear industry has to disclose whenever they admit anything that might be considered radioactive.
But activist citizens and others involved in the issue say that's not exactly what happened. A bill was passed by a Senate committee, but never became law. And some whom Obama tried to help say he compromised too much with corporate interests. Obama's initial bill said nuclear plants shall immediately notify federal, state, and local officials in the event of a leak. Under pressure from committee Republicans and industry lobbyists, that language was weakened to say the Nuclear Regulatory Commission shall consider requiring plants to provide timely notice.
It didn't have any of the teeth, that were in the original drafts of the bill. And I think that was a disappointment for us.
However, it wasn't a disappointment to Exelon, one of the largest employers in Illinois. Exelon officials and workers are Obama's fourth largest contributor, donating $269,000 to his congressional and presidential campaigns. Obama disputes any suggestion that he was helping Exelon. An Obama spokesman says the senator fought industry demands, repeatedly criticized Exelon in the press, and then fought for months to get action on the bill.
We ended up getting more than was in place before, not as much as I originally would have liked.
He also points out that Hillary Clinton applauded the compromise at the time and voted for it. And though the legislation never became law, the nuclear industry did agree to voluntarily report potential hazards.
So the good news is that there's now a voluntary reporting system for every plant in the country. The price of that is that that's a voluntary initiative.
The president will propose a tripling of new loan guarantees for nuclear reactors. That will be in his budget that will be submitted next week. That's going to bring that number to $54 billion. But the same question remains on nuclear power, and that is, what do you do with the spent fuel? What do you do with the waste? Not going to be in Yucca Mountain, according to the president. That's the repository there in Nevada, of course, in Harry Reid's home state. So today, the Energy Department will also be announcing a review to study alternatives on where some of the spent fuel can go. Well, let's look at some of the beneficiaries of the new loan program if it passes Congress. Southern Company of Atlantic, they expect to be the first one to get a loan guarantee in 2 or 3 months. May help them finance 2 additional nuclear reactors down there in Georgia. Now remember, Betty, no new permitting has been done on nuclear power plants in over 30 years, and right now it's a source of about 20% of America's energy. But the plan from the administration is to be less reliant on foreign sources of oil. This is part
Obviously,
of that.
all energy sources have their downsides.
I'm sorry. I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls. This could step us in misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that is abundant has left us want. Our knowledge is made cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. This is too much to feel truthful. More machinery. More than cleverness, kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be powerless. All will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world.